You ever wonder why the West is so obsessed with stability, only when that stability keeps them in control? Because when Ibrahim Traore rose in Burkina Faso, young, fearless, unapologetically African, they didn't see hope. They saw a threat. But here's what they didn't expect. The threat wouldn't come from France alone, or the United States, or NATO. No, it would come from right here, on African soil, from the very leaders who once swore to stand for Pan-Africanism. Presidents in fine suits, shaking hands in global summits, all while signing the backdoor deals that betray the very soil they claim to protect. Let's be clear, Traoré didn't just break with colonial powers, he broke with the system that feeds them. He stopped following the script. He said no to foreign military bases. He reclaimed gold mines. He questioned the CFA franc. He armed his own people and told the world, Africa will defend itself. And for that, he was marked, not just by Washington or Paris, but by fellow African leaders too. Presidents who call for regional peace while sending intelligence reports to foreign embassies. Presidents who claim to support sovereignty while granting flyover rights for Western drones. Presidents who pretend to denounce imperialism while cashing in on it behind closed doors. Let's talk specifics. Why did President Alassane Ouattara of Côte d'Ivoire, a man long accused of dancing to France's tune, suddenly ramp up regional pressure the moment Traoré kicked out French forces? Why did ECOWAS, under the influence of Nigeria's Bola Tinubu, threaten military intervention in Niger, but stay silent when Western weapons were being shipped into the Sahel without local consent? And ask yourself, when Traoré called for a unified African defense, which presidents stepped forward and which ones stepped back? This isn't just betrayal, it's collaboration. You see, Traoré's real enemies don't just wear Western uniforms. Some wear African flags, some sit in AU summits and sip champagne, all while passing on troop movements, drone data, and intel to foreign powers in exchange for aid, debt relief, or military equipment. This is the new face of colonialism, not white faces in khaki uniforms, but black faces in tailored suits playing proxy to the empire. And while Traoré is building bunkers, they're building narratives, calling him radical, dangerous, unstable, whispering to media outlets that he's losing control, pushing stories that frame him not as a liberator, but as a liability. Why? Because he's exposing the game. And worse, he's inspiring others. In Guinea, in Mali, in Niger, young people are watching, soldiers are watching, the streets are whispering, if Traoré can do it, why not us? And that terrifies them. So they want him isolated. They want him surrounded. And they're using his own continent to do it. But here's the part no one's ready to say out loud. Some of these presidents don't just want Traoré gone, they need him gone. Because every day he stays in power, he proves that Africa doesn't need foreign aid to stand up. It just needs courage. And courage is contagious. But what happens when that courage becomes a movement? What happens when other soldiers refuse to betray their people? What happens when the betrayals no longer work? When soldiers refuse to fire on their own people? When youth reject the old politics of polished puppets and imported promises? Because make no mistake, the old guard is panicking. Not in public, of course. In public, they wear calm like cologne. They talk about regional cooperation, democracy, and African unity. But behind closed doors, their hands are shaking over classified cables and encrypted calls from Paris and Washington. Why? Because they know something is shifting. They feel it in the chants from Ouagadougou. They see it in the flags rising in Bamako. They read it in the fiery editorials written not in Brussels, but in Banjul, Accra, and Yaoundé. Africa's silence is cracking, and that's dangerous, not for the people, but for the presidents who were never chosen by the people in the first place. Let me ask you this. If Traoré is such a threat to democracy, why is it that the most corrupt regimes are the loudest in condemning him? If he's so illegitimate, why does he command such loyalty from ordinary Burkinabe, even without the media machine behind him? And here's the kicker. If he's so isolated, why are Western diplomats flying into neighboring capitals at night, meeting with regional leaders behind guarded doors? Because they're not planning peace, they're plotting strategy. See, what they fear isn't Traore's army, it's his message. Because his message is simple and powerful. We don't need your troops. We don't need your currency. We don't need your approval. We need our land, our gold, our dignity, and we will take it. Now imagine if that message spreads, not just to soldiers in fatigues, but to students, farmers, doctors, and drivers across the continent. What happens when that message becomes more powerful than Western money or media? I'll tell you what happens. The empire loses its grip. So what do? They call on their allies, not in Europe, but in Lomé, in Dakar, in Nairobi. Presidents who've traded loyalty for luxury, leaders who keep their nations in debt while stashing their own wealth in Parisian bank accounts. These men aren't just cooperating with the West, they're subcontracting African suppression, and they have tools. They'll block border shipments, they'll freeze military partnerships, they'll infiltrate Traore's support networks with spies and disinformation agents. They'll accuse him of destabilizing the region, as if the region wasn't already bleeding from decades of stabilization. But here's the plot twist they're not ready for. The more they try to isolate him, the more he becomes a symbol of resistance, of refusal, of rebirth. And that's where this story takes a darker turn. Because when narrative warfare fails, the bullets come next. Ask yourself, why are drones flying more frequently over Sahelian airspace? Why are special forces training counter-terror units in countries that haven't seen a terror attack in years? Why are certain presidents suddenly increasing defense budgets, right after private meetings with Western advisors? This isn't preparation for war on terror. It's preparation for a war on sovereignty. And Traore is just the first test. They want to know, can the African dream be crushed before it spreads? Because if they fail to stop him, they won't just lose Burkina Faso. They'll lose Mali. They'll lose Niger. They'll lose Congo. They'll lose the illusion of control. And that would be the beginning of the end. So now the question is, how far are they willing to go? Because the truth is, this isn't just about one man in Burkina Faso. It's about a system fighting for survival, a system built on puppets, payouts, and propaganda. And here's what they won't tell you on the news. What's being planned behind closed doors isn't diplomacy, it's sabotage. Let me break it down. One president, we won't name names just yet, recently signed an anti-extremism security pact with a Western power. Sounds harmless, right? But buried in the agreement's fine print, a clause allowing foreign operatives to operate inside neighboring countries without notifying their governments. Let that sink in. Foreign soldiers operating on African soil, with immunity and without consent. Now ask yourself, who are they really hunting? Terrorists or truth-tellers? And who do you think they'll call extremist when the time comes? The corrupt general with Swiss bank accounts? Or the 35-year-old revolutionary who says Africa first? You see, this is how it starts. First, they fund anonymous think tanks to publish intelligence briefings, smearing Traore's name. Then, social media campaigns begin, calling him a dictator, a Russian puppet, an enemy of progress. Next, the so-called civil society groups, many of them funded by foreign embassies, begin to stage protests, demanding a return to constitutional order. But they're not talking about justice. They're talking about control. Because constitutional order, in the mouths of those who never respected African constitutions to begin with, is nothing more than a code word for get back in line. And that's when the isolation begins. Borders quietly close. Aid is suspended. Sanctions creep in, not on the elite, but on the people. Food prices rise. Medicine runs dry. The aim is simple. Turn the people against the patriot. Make them believe that freedom is too expensive. But here's what the architects of this sabotage don't understand. The era of soft puppets and silent people is over. Traore may be the spark, but the forest is dry, and across the continent, the flames are rising. In high schools in Guinea, in the markets of Bamako, on WhatsApp groups in Kisangani, on TikTok videos from the slums of Nairobi, A new generation is watching, and they are not fooled. They've seen the pattern before. Libya, Sudan, Ivory Coast. The moment a leader dares to step out of line, suddenly they're dangerous, erratic, corrupt. But who defines danger? Is it a soldier defending his village from a foreign drone strike? Or a president who signs away national resources for a photo op in Paris? Let's be clear, this isn't just a battle for Burkina Faso. It's a battle for the African narrative. Who gets to write the story? Who gets to name the heroes? And who gets to erase them? And that brings us to the most disturbing part of this plot, the part almost no one is talking about. Because while Western strategists craft the blueprint, it's African hands building the prison. It's African voices on international panels saying, Traore is not ready. It's African diplomats who smile for the cameras while stabbing their own people in the back. It's African presidents reading scripts they didn't write, voting in rooms they weren't invited to draft. And all of it, under the banner of cooperation. But tell me, how can you cooperate with a system designed to keep you under control? How do you collaborate with an empire that sees you not as a partner, but as a pawn? Because that's what Traore is rejecting. Not peace, not unity, but a unity built on submission. He's saying no, not just to the West, but to the West within Africa. And that is the real threat. Because when your own brothers begin to see your strength as a threat, that's when you know. The battle lines aren't just between continents. They are inside the continent, inside the palaces, inside the parliaments, inside the presidential jet rides funded by foreign loans. And the betrayal is coming from inside the house. Now here's the part that will make some of you uncomfortable. Because the betrayal, it's not just political, it's cultural, it's psychological, and it's generational. You see, for decades, African leaders were groomed, not to lead, but to manage. Manage the status quo, manage their people's expectations, manage foreign interests while wearing African fabric and quoting Mandela. But Traore, he isn't managing, he's dismantling. And that is what terrifies the old guard. Because if he succeeds, even a little, then the mask falls. And suddenly all the myths begin to crack. That we need Western troops to feel safe, that our currencies must be tied to European banks. That development only comes from donor conferences in Geneva. That Pan-Africanism is just a slogan, not a strategy. But deep down, they know. If one young captain from Burkina Faso can shake the table, what happens when 5 others rise? What happens when the next Sankara doesn't get assassinated, but gets amplified? What happens when a new alliance is born? Not in theory, but in action. And make no mistake, the sabotage isn't just happening at the top. It's creeping through the seams. Fake news is flooding African airwaves. Propaganda pages, often run by digital mercenaries from Europe and the Middle East, are pumping out anti-Traore content daily. They say he's too radical. They say he's destabilizing the region. They say he's isolating Burkina Faso. But here's a question no one's asking. Is it really isolation, or is it liberation without permission? Because there's a difference. One is being left behind. The other is walking away. And what Traore is doing, with all his flaws, his youth, his rawness, is walking away from a script written in foreign ink. He's choosing the hard path, the path with no guarantees, the path that doesn't end in a handshake in Brussels, but in sleepless nights in Ouagadougou. And that's why the whispers have begun. You've heard them. He won't last a year. He'll be overthrown. He's too young, too bold, too alone. But ask yourself this, why are they so obsessed with making him fall? Why is it that presidents with offshore accounts and Swiss villas are embraced as stable, but a man who walks the streets of his capital unarmed is labeled dangerous? Because in this upside-down world, truth is a threat, and courage, a contagion. Now, here's the part that should make us all pay attention. There's chatter inside diplomatic circles. Whispers of regional intervention, conversations around stabilizing Burkina Faso, even proposals and allegedly of a joint West African task force, not to fight terrorism, but to restore the old political order. Let me say it plainly. They are preparing a velvet coup, not with tanks this time, but with treaties, not with generals, but with special envoys, and not in the name of the people, but democratic principles. But where were these principles when puppet presidents sold off our minds? Where were they when journalists were jailed for exposing corruption? Where were they when foreign military bases turned African soil into drone playgrounds? Traore isn't perfect. No leader is. But the fear isn't about his imperfections. It's about his direction, because he's walking away from the leash. And the last time an African leader tried that, he didn't make it to old age. Beat. Long pause, music fades slightly. The tone deepens. But here's the twist, and you may not be ready for this. It won't be a Western bullet that takes him down. It will be an African handshake from a brother wearing the same suit, speaking the same language, claiming the same flag. And that is what makes this moment so dangerous. Because if we don't name the betrayal now, we'll wake up one day and the revolution will be gone. Not defeated, just absorbed. So now the question is, what do we do? What do we, as everyday Africans, as members of the diaspora, as people watching this unfold, do when we see the fire being snuffed out? Do we scroll past it? Do we wait for the headlines to tell us what to think? Do we hope that some miracle saves Traore before the machine swallows him whole? Because let me be clear, this machine isn't just after Traore, it's after the idea of him, the idea that Africa doesn't need babysitters, that sovereignty is not negotiable, that young Africans can lead without permission, that loyalty to the continent is more important than loyalty to Paris, Washington, or London. And so every lie told about him, every whisper campaign, every quiet plot in an air-conditioned hotel lobby is not just an attack on a man, it's an attack on a moment we may not see again for decades if we let it slip. And here's the cruel irony. Those presidents, those elites who are collaborating behind closed doors, they've already calculated the cost of Traore's fall. They know Burkina Faso will descend into fear again. They know foreign boots will return. They know the old deals, the dirty ones, will quietly resume. But they've made peace with that, because for them, it's better to stay relevant in a broken system than to risk becoming obsolete in a free one. They're not afraid of chaos, they're afraid of change. But what about us? What about the millions of young Africans watching this moment from Johannesburg to Kigali, from Dakar to Nairobi? We are not the spectators anymore. We are the storm. We are the algorithm they can't control. We are the voice notes that won't be deleted. We are the digital drumbeat of a continent waking up. So let them plot. Let them whisper. Let them shake hands in shadows. Because this generation, we've seen through the theater. We know who the puppets are. We know who writes the scripts. And we are done clapping for betrayal. Traore may fall, or he may rise. But either way, the spark has been lit. And there are more of us now, watching, recording, remembering. So when they come with their peace missions, when they say for the good of the region, when they try to erase him with paperwork and press statements, just remember, the revolution isn't a person, it's a direction. And once a people have seen the truth, not even tanks can make them unsee it. Now it's your turn. What do you see happening next? Do you believe Traore is being isolated by design? And if African leaders are helping the West bring him down, why? What are they afraid of? Drop your thoughts in the comments section. Share this video with everyone who still believes Africa can stand. Because if we don't tell our own stories, someone else will, and they'll lie. This isn't just about Burkina Faso. This is about us all. Africa. Rising or ruined, we decide.